Hi. Today we are going to be discussing avian influenza, how it manifests biologically in both animals and humans, as well as its societal impacts. First, what actually is avian influenza? Avian influenza is a highly contagious and viral disease. Primarily, it affects birds, but can also be transmitted to humans via birds. Once infected by this virus, it causes severe illness and, at worst cases, death. Avian influenza is classified as a type A virus. This means that it has a high likelihood for evolution and can jump easily from species to species. The subtypes of avian influenza can be divided based on the severity of illness the virus causes. The first type is low pathogenic avian influenza. This causes minimal symptoms and more mild effects. The second type is high pathogenic avian influenza. This case can cause very severe illness and, in most extreme cases, death. Because avian influenza affects birds and humans both, we're going to discuss them separately. This disease is much more rare in humans than in birds, but still, humans can be infected. In some cases, humans do not have any symptoms. However, if they do, they are usually clear 1 to 5 days after being exposed. Symptoms of more mild cases include cough, shortness of breath, fever, headache, runny nose, fatigue, and red eyes. These more moderate symptoms can progress into more concerning ones, including respiratory illness like trouble breathing, pneumonia, respiratory failure, and even seizures. In the most severe cases, the virus causes organ failure leading to death. Now we're going to discuss on a more detailed level how avian influenza virus actually infects the human body. This virus mainly targets cells in the respiratory tract or in the gut. It contains surface proteins called H proteins. These proteins go to the cells and attach to specific receptors on the cell surface. Once bound to the cell, they are able to alter transcription in the nucleus, infecting the cell. Post-infection, the cells die, leading to damages in the respiratory lining, inflammation, and fluid buildup in the body. Avian influenza's effects inside the cell are a complicated process. However, this process can be summarized in a couple of steps. First, like I mentioned before, the surface proteins from the virus bind to the cell surface. Once they are bound, they enter the cell in a vesicle. Inside this vesicle, the protein is exposed to acidic conditions, allowing it to release its RNA into the cytoplasm. Then, the RNA travels to the nucleus, where it alters transcription and replication, overall creating new RNA. This newly copied RNA leaves the nucleus and goes back into the cytoplasm. Then the RNA travels to the cell membrane, and here it assembles new influenza particles using proteins from the cell. Finally, these newly assembled influenza particles leave the cell altogether to go infect other cells, and the process continues on and on. The body's immune system responds to this invading virus in two different manners. The first type of response the body employs is an innate immune response. This innate immune response happens very quickly. However, its plan of attack is not specific. It is just the immediate first line of defense. This response is not very thought out. It really just attacks. This response involves infected cells releasing interferons and cytokines. These interferons and cytokines warn neighboring cells and also tells the body slow down on protein synthesis in order to limit viral spread of the disease. The release of these proteins can cause fever and inflammation in the body, and they also cause the body to recruit even more immune cells to battle the virus. The second type of response the body activates is the adaptive immune response. This response takes longer to kick in, think days. While this process is slower, it is more effective, coming in with a specific and detailed plan of attack. Another interesting aspect of this kind of response is that it has memory, allowing itself to constantly build up its skills and effectiveness. The adaptive response activates B cells. The job of these cells is to detect the virus and start pumping out as many antibodies as it can. The antibodies go to the virus, stick to it, and try to block it from entering into the cells. Another type of cell is also involved in this immune process. These are the T cells. Their job is to find infected cells and destroy them before they can affect the rest of the body. This contrasts the antibodies who confront the virus directly. The T cells can either directly destroy infected cells themselves, or they can instruct the immune system on what to do. While we're going to discuss this in much less detail than in humans, I thought I would mention a few symptoms that infected birds experience. These symptoms include lack of energy or movement, nervousness, swelling in the head, diarrhea, and in extreme cases, sudden death. Now that we have discussed avian influenza on a more biological level, it is important to be aware of how it is spread. Primarily, the virus is spread when it is shed in the feces or other respiratory secretions of birds. Then, other birds either come into contact directly with these secretions or possibly through contaminated water. The virus is able to survive for long periods of time, allowing it to spread from farm to farm via different farming equipment. The primary way humans are infected with this disease is through the poultry business. Humans that work in this field are often coming into close contact with animals. Being in close contact with infected birds for a prolonged amount of times is a way for the virus to be transmitted to humans. Climate change due to human activity is causing global warming. This warming of the earth leads to cases of extreme heat in certain areas and indirectly heightens the spread of avian influenza. A specific example is a case in Colorado. A group of poultry workers could not properly wear their protective equipment due to high heat conditions. This led to an outbreak, and many workers were infected with the disease. This begs the question, is this an ethical issue? Should these workers continue to be put in these vulnerable and possibly dangerous positions? In addition, climate change is shifting where wild birds migrate and gather, which helps spread avian influenza to new places and new bird populations. Finally, overall warmer conditions on Earth allow the virus to stay alive for longer periods of time. The farming sector is greatly influenced by avian influenza. This virus causes high mortality rates among birds, sometimes killing entire flocks. This can be detrimental to farmers who would then go on to lose their animals, money they've invested into raising the animals, and their primary source of income. Less birds also means a decline in the poultry industry, less meat, less eggs, less products in the grocery stores. This decline also includes any jobs associated, including farmers, truck drivers, manufacturers, and so on. Finally, international trade restrictions are becoming more strict due to the virus. This means farmers and poultry companies suddenly lose access to international buyers, which can be a huge part of their income. Farmers are not the only people affected. Shipping companies and even national economies that heavily rely on the poultry industry face setbacks. As time goes on, avian influenza is constantly affecting health policies in our society. For example, the Public Agency of Canada's guidance emphasizes a One Health approach. This approach specifically focuses on the fact that avian influenza does not just affect one sector or of society. Policies relating to this command that if avian influenza cases are detected, communication between provincial health units, food inspection sites, and environmental authorities must ensue. One Health offers guidance on an efficient and effective response plan in a unified structure, requiring input from many sectors and categories. Another way public health policies regarding avian influenza are changing is that now Canada has standardized definitions of avian influenza cases to make reporting more consistent and reliable. Finally, implemented policies mandate that public health units must identify, track, and follow up with people exposed to this disease or potentially contaminated environments. Finally, what can everyday people do to alleviate this issue? While solving this worldwide issue is definitely a daunting task, it is not to say that only healthcare and environmental professionals can make a difference. You can practice safe food handling, avoid direct contact with sick or dead birds, and follow and support public health updates. Thank you for watching.